our show. Lots of good information from Matt Royal, all about negotiating on commercial properties. Now, that stuff's always interesting for people who own businesses that maybe want to rent out office space. But there's a much bigger piece of the community that isn't necessarily business owners, don't need office space. And that is, well, probably our typical listener out there who is a homeowner or looking to buy a home. And they need negotiation tips too, especially in a market like we have today. David Bell joins us. You know him as our resident RE/MAX Hall of Famer, who's also earned Seattle Magazine's 5-star Best in Client Satisfaction Award. Every year it's been offered. David, how are you, my man?
Great, Ben. How are you doing? Great to be back.
It's good to see you again.
Yeah, it's not raining outside.
Isn't that something?
You know, I got an email this morning from King 5 Weather that because of all the rain, we're going to have a lot of landslides possibly.
Well, I hope you're not selling too many houses out on Magnolia Bluff. So David,
no, most of that's gone now.
Yeah, it is slowly. So David, let's we just Matt talked a lot about the commercial negotiation, and it's qualifying what you want, understanding why it's important to your business, and certainly it's maybe a little bit tougher to deviate from the needs of a business rather than like the needs of a family, because there's lots of different styles and types of houses out there. Do you see it differing the negotiation of residential versus commercial?
A difference between the two? Yeah, absolutely. I ran a division of a national company for about 15 years, and I've made this statement several times, not here, but you could take a businessman and you could do a multi-million-dollar negotiation with him, and he's going to look at business reasons why he's doing what he's doing. You take that same man and you go to sell or to help him buy a $700,000 house, and he's a basket case because it's all full of emotion, and there's very little business that comes into any of that stuff. So as a real estate agent, you're doing the negotiation parts of it, but a lot of your negotiation is not only with the other party, it's also with your own party. And part of that negotiation is also being kind of an amateur psychologist and really helping them stay on track and helping them understand what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. The market also changes so rapidly in residential real estate. You know, we've been in a downturn for several years. I mean, the market flattened out a couple years ago, and it stayed pretty flat. House prices haven't really gone up a whole lot. But we've had an inventory shortage, so the good houses that have come up now have been selling with multiple offers. So then sellers get the idea, well, I'm going to put my house on the market and I'm going to get multiple offers and it's going to get bid up $100,000. And so they put their house on the market and they don't get an offer, and then so it's the real estate agent's fault. Or if they get an offer and it's under asking price, well, I thought I was going to get bid up. So you're dealing with a whole lot of emotion and misunderstanding and people that really are not working from a business basis. They're working from an emotional basis, and that's most of the people out there. And that's just the way it is, and that's normal, and that's probably not going to change a whole lot.
I guess to your point, it seems that the only real business piece of this is on the financing, and there's typically kind of a hard number. We are pre-approved up to this amount.
Exactly,
we have this amount for a down payment, so there's really a struggle that I guess maybe 1 or 2%, 3% of an asking price, and that's really where any financial negotiation is happening outside of, the terms, which are such
Right.
a minimal thing, and it's really just appeasing one party or the other when somebody even needs to get moving trucks out or whatnot.
Right, exactly. You know, one of the biggest things that I try to do with my clients when I work with buyers and is really give them a very realistic idea of what a property is worth. And I wish I had $1 for every time I've said this to people. A house comes up that they like, but it's $100,000 overpriced. And I'll say, if somebody wants to buy that for $100,000 over what it's worth, then let them buy that. So if you don't want to spend that for it, and I don't recommend you spend that for it, you need to wait. You need to be patient and see what happens with that house. So we'll track the house. We'll see, they'll get a $25,000 price reduction. Then they'll get a $50,000 price reduction. But you have to wait. You have to be patient because it has to be on the market for several months for the seller now to get the idea that, gee, maybe I overpriced this. When you ask a lot of people how a house was priced, and you ask a lot of real estate agents how a house is priced, the real true answer in probably a majority of the cases is the seller prices the house because they know best about what their house is worth. And their house is always worth more than anybody else's in the neighborhood.
Sure.
And most real estate agents don't, I shouldn't say most, but there's a lot of real estate agents that don't have the confidence to really tell clients, hey, your house is not worth $700,000, it's worth $550,000.
So if we were to take this, and go to kind of through the path and then go the negotiations that happen during a transaction, top to bottom, it really starts with this pricing of a house, and that sounds like there's a little bit of a three-way negotiation. You have what the market will bear, you have what the seller thinks their house is probably worth, which is more, and then you have the professional, the real estate agent, who's more of understands the market but also understands what the seller wants to get, and in some way it has to mold into what is construed as, here's our listing price.
Yeah, then you have to also throw in what an appraiser is going to appraise it for. Otherwise, the loan's not going to go through.
Mm-hmm.
So you got four. But yeah, you do. So it really starts at the very beginning. So when you're working with a buyer, it starts when you first sit down with a buyer and you set up and you discuss realistic expectations about what they can buy for what they can afford to spend. And then it goes from there. And after a while, after you look at a few houses with clients that really understand that, they start getting a fairly good idea of what a $400,000 house really is, and what a $500,000 house really is. And then when they see that and they say, yeah, okay, that makes sense. But when they walk into a $400,000 house that's priced at $500,000, then
it's a lot of look and feel, though.
It's a lot of look and feel.
So if we were to talk about, and again, we're here with David Bell, managing broker with RE/MAX Metro East Side. So, David, if you start looking at the business reasons, what are the big negotiation parts that somebody goes in? Really, you're negotiating what's on the contract, right? Which is a price and some time frames.
Those are the business reasons. Those are some of the legal ramifications of writing an offer, is that you have to adhere to this stuff. You also have to take into account the financing, so what the lender really requires and what the lender wants. And like I said earlier, you take into what the appraiser's going to really look at this and say. A lot of deals fall apart because the appraiser comes in and says it's not worth this.
Okay, so then from the other side, if there's really not, there's not a lot of business negotiation, as you said from the beginning. It's a lot more of this almost amateur psychologist. What are all the emotional reasons? How much emotional negotiation is there, and how does that play out?
There's a lot. And from a percentage standpoint, I haven't thought of that from a terms of a percentage standpoint. I would imagine that a majority of it, if it's a married couple, they have kids, there's so many factors that are involved. If they have to move, they're moving here from Oklahoma and they have to be in school and, starting in September or starting in August, and they are transferred here in August, they've got a lot of pressure on them to find something, to find a right school district, to do all this stuff. And if somebody is already living here and they're just looking to upscale, the dynamics are different in every situation. So you can't just answer that kind of across the board. So it really depends on the circumstances that the buyer's in and the circumstances that the seller's in. If the seller's being transferred to New York City and they want to move, and they know that if their listing agent has told them your house is going to look better if you leave your furniture here, and so the husband leaves or the wife leaves and the husband stays back or the wife stays back until the house sells, then they start getting more motivation. So that it all changes. So every circumstance is different.
So a lot of the emotion, and we do have to go to break in about a minute, but a lot of that emotion comes from the motivation.
From the motivation and the circumstance.
And why we need something to happen. And then there's, of course, the falling in love with a house.
Yes, and there's a lot of falling in love with the house. And, that's one of the things that I've talked on the show a lot about, is that 80% of decisions are made by the heart, and a good real estate agent really needs to make sure that one foot is firmly planted in reality when they buy that house. I make an analogy to when you hire somebody. I ran a large staff for a long time, and it was really important to hire the right person for the position, not just the best available of the 5 that came in and interviewed that day. The same is exactly true for a house. If you go out and look at 5 houses, do you pick the best one and you buy that if it's not the right house for you? I don't I think you don't do that.
Well,
I think you wait until you find the right house.
And then going back to the long-term relationship. I mean, once as a professional real estate agent, once you understand the emotion behind it, once you understand what they're going through and why they make decisions, I would think that the next time they buy a house and the next time they buy or sell a house, now you're in a really good position because you already understand maybe that family's culture and their decision-making process, and that would make it again a stronger reason to work with somebody again.
Right, and they know you as well, and they know that you get results, and there's much more trust built up in a second and third transaction, so you don't have to go through as much, and it makes it a little bit easier for everybody involved.
Yeah. Well, David, thanks so much for joining us. Stick around for a little bit. I would love to chat with you a little bit more here at the end of the show. Again, David Bell with RE/MAX, and David, always interesting information when you try to think about the reasons that go into buying a house and how people balance the emotion versus the money versus, what maybe their true motivations are.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, my pleasure. When we come back, we are going to chat with one of our good friends of our show, Glenn Thiessen. We'll be right back after this break.